Hi everybody, this is Crystal. Welcome to my channel, Bagoday Crochet. So today I'm going to show you how to crochet this stitch. This is the zigzag puff stitch. It's very, very beautiful. I mean, super, super beautiful. And it's very, very thick. Very thick. You can see that. See how thick that is? Looks the same on both sides. So it makes a very thick, dense fabric. It is quite a bit of a yarn eater. If you have enough yarn, it makes a great blanket, or it makes great stuff like bags, pot holders, hot pads, hats, wristers, things, smaller items. But like I said, if you have enough yarn, of course, you can make a blanket out of it if you want to. I started to do this stitch, and then when I finished, I thought it was so pretty, so I went around mine with single crochet, as you can see, and I made mine a small placemat that my kids can like I can set it up on the counter or the table, and they can set their bowl of soup on, or bowl of cereal on, and eat it like that. So, but it's really just a stitch tutorial, but I bordered mine, and I'll show you how I did that. In case you want to do that, you can make a big scarf with it, or whatever you want to do. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started, and I'll talk about the yarn that I use. Remember, if you are new, thank you for joining me. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that like button. And if you look below, there's in the description box, there will be a playlist of all my crochet tutorials. I have over 1,000, so please check them out if you get time. That is so pretty. And this isn't hard. This isn't hard, okay? It's very, very easy to do. Gosh, that's pretty. Okay. So for the yarn that I use for that particular item right there was Lion Brand Landscapes, which is a 100% acrylic, medium weight number 4. And the color is called Skyline. Now for the purpose of the tutorial though, I'm going to use a yarn that's less busy. I'm going to be using Premier Basics, which is a medium weight number 4. As well, the color of this is Pumpkin. Now, and I'm going to be using a size J, which is what I use for my little placemat over there. And it's what I'm going to be using to show you how to make this. So you can make whatever you want with this. It's done in any even number of stitches. So you start with the slip knot on your hook. And you chain in an even number until you get the size that you want it to be. So if you want to make a scarf, you just kind of make it the width of your scarf. Alright, so once you get your chain of any even number of stitches made, what we're going to do for row 1 is we are going to do a single crochet in the second stitch from our hook. So we don't count the one that's on our hook. So in that second stitch, we do a single crochet, and then we go ahead and we work 1 single crochet in every stitch for the length of the chain. So row 1 is just 1 single crochet in every stitch until you get to the end of your row. Alright, so you make it to the end of row 1, and we're going to go ahead and start row 2, and we're going to start making some puff stitches. But first we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. So that chain 1 does not count as a stitch, okay? It doesn't count as anything. So what we're going to do is go right back into this very first stitch right here and put a single crochet. And then we're going to chain 1. Now we're going to work a puff stitch into the very next stitch. So this is how we work the puff stitch. We're going to yarn over, go into the stitch, and draw up a loop about the same length. A little bit tall like that. We want to do that 3 times total, so that would be number 1. Again, we're going to yarn over, go into the same stitch, draw up a loop about the same length as the others. That's 2 times. And then again, yarn over into the same stitch, draw up a loop about the same size. You should have 7 loops on your hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yarn over and go through all 7 and chain 1 like that. Now we're going to skip 1 stitch and puff stitch into the next. So yarn over, skip this stitch, and in the next one we're going to do our puff stitch. So we yarned over and we're going to draw up a loop a little bit tall like that, and we want to do that 3 times. So that was 1, again yarn over, go into the same stitch, draw up a loop, that's 2, yarn over, go into the same stitch, draw up a loop, that's 3, 7 loops on your hook, yarn over and go through all 7 and chain 1. And that is the repeat of row 1, or row 2, I'm sorry. It's the repeat of row 2. We're going to skip the next stitch and puff stitch in the next. So yarn over, skip, and in the next, go in, draw up a loop, a little tall like that, 3 times. That's 1, yarn over, go in, draw up a loop, that's 2, yarn over, go into the same stitch again, draw up a loop, that's 3, 7 loops, yarn over and go through all 7 and chain 1. And let's go ahead and repeat this till we get to the end of the row. Skip 1, skip, and puff into the next. Just like that. Skip 1, puff, skip 1, puff, and I'll meet you near the end of the row. Alright, so I'm coming to the end of row 2, and I just did a puff, chain 1 after it, and you see I have 3 stitches left. What I'm going to do is skip 1 and puff into the second to the last stitch, chain 1, and then I'm going to single crochet into my last stitch, and that will end row 2. So that's kind of what it looks like. Alright, let's begin row 3. We're going to chain 1 and turn our work. Now that chain 1 does not count as a stitch. Alright, so we are going to put a single crochet right here into the very first stitch. It's the single crochet from the previous row. And then we are going to chain 1. Now we're going to jump over here in between these next 2 puffs, and we're going to be working in the single crochet down here that we skipped, and we're going to puff into it. So we're going to yarn over, drop down in between these puffs and that single crochet there that we skipped, yarn over and go into it and draw up a loop, draw it up a little tall like that, and make our puff. And remember, we want to do that 3 times. So that was number 1, yarn over, go into that same stitch again, draw up a loop, that's 2 times. One more time, yarn over, go into that same spot, draw up a loop, 3 times, 7 loops on your hook, yarn over and go through all 7 and chain 1, just like that. Don't worry about that opening, that will go away on the next row. And that's what we're going to do now for row 3. We're going to be doing a puff stitch in each of these single crochets that we skipped 2 rows below. So again, I'm going to yarn over and go down here to the single crochet that I skipped and do a puff into it. So make sure you pull up your loop a little bit, even with the one that's on your hook, the very first one, kind of like that. And we're going to do that 3 times. So that was 1, that's 2, that's 3, 7 loops, yarn over and go through all 3 and chain 1. Again, jump in here between our next puffs. Right down here you'll see the single crochet. We're going to put a puff into that one. Now once you get this down, you'll be booking it. Chain 1, move to the next one. Right down here in between these 2 puffs, this single crochet here that we skipped, go into it and work a puff. Now this is a pattern we're going to repeat for row 3 until we get to the end of the row. It's puff stitching and chaining 1 in each of these single crochets that we skipped 2 rows below. Alright, I've come to the end of row 3. I just did a puff into this single crochet, the last single crochet here that we skipped. And then remember, we did a puff and then a single crochet. So what we're going to do is I puffed, I chained 1. We're going to skip this puff and we're going to single crochet into the last single crochet of the row. And that will end row 3. There we go. Now we're going to start row 4. So rows 4 and 5 are the repeat rows, and they're pretty much the same. It's just the way you start and finish them that's a little different. So for row 4, we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. Remember that chain 1 does not count as a stitch. Alright, so for row 4, we're going to start off by putting a single crochet into the very first stitch here. And now we are not going to chain 1 here, okay? What we're going to do is go directly down 2 rows below, which is right here, and do a puff stitch in this space right here. So you can see here's the puff from 2 rows below. We're going to go right here in this space and we're going to work a puff. So kind of just go right into it and work a puff stitch. And then chain 1 like that, and then we're going to jump over here in between our next 2 puffs and we're going to work in the space of the next puff. So what I like to do is this puff here, I slide it over and you can see this spot right here. That's where we need to go into. It's kind of the side of the puff, not here, but this puff 2 rows below. This little, if you spread it, take this puff and then this puff right up here, spread them, you'll see that little spot. So you do a puff into that spot right there, 2 rows below. This is what keeps our puffs and pull it up tall, even with the rest of your, even with your first loop. This is what keeps our puffs tight together and gives such a thick fabric by doing them 2 rows below. Chain 1 and then repeat that. So here's our next 2 puffs and we want to work in the puff in the row below. So pull it apart and you'll see that little spot right there on the side of the puff. See that? That's where you need to puff into. So yarn over and go into that spot and go ahead and work your puff into that spot. And this is what we're going to repeat until we get to the end. Chain 1. Again, you find your next 2 puffs. We're going to work at the side of this one right here, the row below. Pull it apart and you see it right there, that spot you need to go into on the side of the puff. Go right into that and make a puff. So I'm going to repeat this pattern until I get to the end of the row here. Chain 1. Go over here to your next spot in between these puffs and the one below. Right there it is. That's where we need to work into. So yarn over and go into that spot and puff. So I'll meet up with you at the end of the row. Alright, I'm coming to the end of row 4 here. I just did a puff here, down here, and you can see there's a puff here on the end. You want to go ahead and do the puff, not in this chain space, not in this space here, but down on the side of this puff, last puff on the end. And that kind of closes up that chain space there. Puff into it, chain 1, and then we're going to single crochet into the very last single crochet of the row, like that. And that will end row 4. Now we'll start row 5, which is the final repeat of the row. So we're going to chain 1 and turn, and we are going to single crochet into the very first stitch. And this is where it's different from the previous row. This time we're going to chain 1 after the single crochet, and we're going to work our first puff, not in this space, not down here, but we skip this puff. We're going to work it in between these two. So this puff down here. So just spread it apart. You see that? The space right here on the side of this puff. We're going to do a puff into that one. And then chain one. And then we kind of repeat like normal. So you find your next two puffs here, and we're going to puff in the side of the puff row from the row before, 2 rows down, right there, just right in this spot here. See that? So you got to kind of pull them apart a little bit to find out where you're going. So we're just working in the sides of puff stitches from 2 rows down. Here's our next 2 puffs, and we need to work in this one here from 2 rows down, kind of pull it apart a bit, and you'll see that spot right there, right here, that we need to work into, and puff into that spot. Chain one, and we're going to do this all the way down. Go to the next spot, pull, puff over, right here is where you need to work into. Side of that puff from 2 rows before. So I'm going to continue this pattern until I get to near the end of row 5. Alright, so I've made it to the end of row 5, and what you can see is I puff stitch down here into this puff, and what I have left is 1 puff stitch here and then the single crochet on the end. So I chained 1 after this puff, and what I'm going to do is skip this one and single crochet into the last single crochet of the row, and that will end row 5, and that will end the repeat rows. So what you do is you just keep repeating rows 4 and 5. Now if we was to repeat row 4, we're going to start on row 6, which is a repeat of row 4. We chain 1 and turn our work, and we single crochet back into the very first stitch. Now on this row we do not chain 1, we just go directly down here to this first puff right here, see it, 2 rows below, and we do our puff stitch there. Chain 1 and go to the next one, puff stitch down here. So remember, it's just the start and the finish that's a little bit different. Whenever you are, so I'm repeating row 4. Whenever you're repeating row 4, you always single crochet and do not chain 1, and go directly into the very first space 2 rows below. But when you are repeating row 5, you single crochet and chain 1, and then you skip that first puff and start working into the one next to it. So you just keep repeating rows 4 and 5. And we get to the end here of row 4. Or row 6, which is a repeat of row 4. Look how thick that is. It's nice. And when you come to the end of row 6, remember we're repeating row 4. You'll have a puff here at the end, and you'll need to go into that, not into the space, but into this puff here, and puff into it. Chain 1 and single crochet into the last single crochet of the row, and that ends row 6, which is a repeat of row 4. And then we will begin row 7, which is a repeat of row 5. It's where we chain 1 and turn, single crochet into the first single crochet, and now we chain 1 here, and we don't work here, but we work into this puff when we repeat row 5. So into that spot there. So puff into that one, chain 1, and then into the next one down here. how easy this is. Once you get the hang of it, like I said, you'll be flying. Now let me go ahead and make it to the end of this row, and I'll show you how you finish off. Alright, when you're coming to the end of row 7, which is just a repeat of row 5, I did my puff stitch here, 2 rows below. I have 1 puff left and a single crochet, so make sure you chain 1 after your last puff, skip this puff, and single crochet into your last stitch. Now you would just keep repeating rows 4 and 5 like I did here until you get to your desired length. And once that is done, I'll show you what I did to finish mine off, I think, which works well. I think it's the single crochet row around it. Makes it look really nice and clean. I think it's a good finishing edge for this stitch. If you wanted to use something different, you can. But what I did was chain 1 and turn. And then I single crocheted back into the very first stitch. And then into the chain space and the top of the puff. And then into the chain space and single crochet into the top of the puff, through the chain space, the top of the puff, through the chain space, the top of the puff, chain space, top of the puff, all the way here to the end. And then when you make it to the last stitch of the row here, go into this chain space here, and then the last stitch here, I'm going to put 3 single crochets there. That will round out the corner, and then I continue down, putting evenly spacing out single crochets down. So just do your best to kind of put a single crochet at the end of every row. And then when you make it to the last stitch down here, I also put 3 single crochets into that to round that corner out. And then I went down, this is the bottom of the work, and put 1 single crochet, you can see, in every stitch. Remember, you don't have to do this, but I thought it made a nice finishing edge for it. It's just one way you can border it to clean it up and make it look a little bit neater. And it's a simple way. And then when you make it to the corner here, you put 3 single crochets in that corner. The 3 single crochets kind of help around the corner and help it lay flat, and then you work 1 single crochet up the side, however long yours is. Kind of evenly space out your single crochets. Try to get 1 at the end of every row. Just do your best. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then when you make it back up to your starting point, which was the very first single crochet, we put 1 in it when we started. Let's go back in and put 2 more. And then I ended with a slip stitch into the first one, and then I tied that off. And then you can hide any tails. There we go. It looks nice. So after you do it for a while, it starts to look like this. And then you can round the corners if you want. You don't have to, but I think it's nice. Nice, thick fabric. It's absolutely pretty. I'll probably make 4 of them like this. Maybe just different colors of Lion Brand landscapes. And then, like I said, I can set them up on my counter, and my kids can set them in front of them and put their bowl or whatever, their plate on it. and eat. I think it's turned out nice, but I can't wait to see what you use this stitch for. And remember, if you make anything out of this stitch, you can always show me a picture on my Facebook page or Instagram. I'll put links to both of those below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn them notifications on, and give me a like, and give me a comment below. Let me know what you're going to make with this stitch, if you're going to make it. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a good day. Bye guys.